Hey, welcome to the Virtually Speaking podcast. My name is Pete Flecha, and joining me as always is my good friend, Mr. John Nicholson. John, welcome back.
Pete, I'm feeling the Friday vibes, and
you look like you're feeling the Fridays, man. That shirt.
Well, this shirt pays homage to the greatest IT movie of all time, which is Jurassic Park. Which, hear me out, is a great movie. Although, it's kind of a tragedy because the protagonist, the IT guy, dies halfway through the movie. Because really the whole story is about one poor IT guy just being overworked, having too many expectations on him by management, and just going down a dark place. Too much time locked into Unix. But anyway, that's how I saw the movie. I don't know about you.
What's the famous quote from that movie, John? Just because we can.
You focus, you focus so much on if you could, not if you should, and I feel like that is many decisions in data centers and in clouds. The Dr. Malcolm quote, that definitely sums up, I feel like, a lot of architecture design decisions.
Yeah, well, John, as always, you are the master of segues, of intros into this podcast. I thank you for that. But yeah, there has been quite a transition, in the world of IT. I know, since you and I have been in this game, which is not too long, but for the time we've been in this game, there's certainly been a shift, right? Customers full on just private data centers moving into, some cloud, but nowadays there's certainly a lot more complex scenarios out there. Some things that can't be in the cloud, in public cloud, some things that shouldn't be there, and the conversation has changed. There's been a lot of discussion about repatriation, as you know. We had David Lithicum on and had a really great conversation just around how him as an analyst, how he's been seeing so many of the transitions to private cloud, from his perspective. So lots of great conversation about it. And I wanted to bring on a couple of folks because, as you know, there's a recent study that just came out we're going to talk about. But also, this whole idea of repatriation, I think it's a fascinating topic. And we've got a couple of experts to join us on this conversation, starting with from the VMware Cloud Foundation division, Raakhee Mistry. Raakhee, welcome.
Hi, Pete. Great to be on.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. I know you're obviously the launch of VCF 9 just came, so I know you guys have been ridiculously busy doing that. But also, a new report just came out talking about the Private Cloud Outlook 2025, and I know that you had some part in that, and so I wanted to pick your brain on that. But before we do, I also wanted to invite to the podcast, first time, but hopefully not last, Mitesh Pancholy. He's a CTO for the field. Mitesh, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity, and also, a big fan of what was being mentioned earlier about Jurassic Park, because one of the main important items of that movie is to drive an amazing customer experience. And that's what private cloud enables for you. So lovely to be on this podcast and happy to deep dive into that conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Mitesh, one of the first times I actually caught your attention, or you caught my attention, I should say, was at VMware Explore last year. You did a session on our own private cloud journey at Broadcom, which I thought was really interesting, talking about just sort of, Broadcom was embarking on this move to full-on VCF and what private cloud was going to look like for them, and you had a big part in that, and that was a really fascinating discussion. So I thought you might be a great person to share some perspective about not only what our customer zero, essentially Broadcom, but also what other customers are doing out there as it pertains to private cloud. So let's get into that. Raakhee, can we start with you and talk a little bit about what exactly is this new study on private cloud?
Great. Yeah, for sure. So we ran some research. We were surveying IT leaders around the world. So we got 1,800, 600 from Americas, 600 from Europe, 600 from APJ, and we asked a broad range of questions regarding their overall perceptions around their cloud strategy, their overall challenges, some of the shifts in investment, a lot of their strategic value. And what you'll see is, these were all pretty senior folks, director and above. responding to this survey. In fact, over 60% are VP and above. Large enterprise organizations, also some mid and small, and a lot of focus around those in highly regulated industries. We thought that was very valuable to get those perspectives of some of the very challenging requirements being set on financial services, public sector, healthcare, all of those. So this was a pretty comprehensive survey. Part of the reason why we thought this was important is we've been talking about private cloud with a lot of our customers, but the amount of data and research out there is somewhat limited. We think that has to do with some of the historical challenges of achieving a private cloud in the past, and some of the historical challenges of getting a full public cloud experience to the goals of our customers. So now, we thought it would be at least worth having some benchmarks out there for our own customers to see what other leaders around the world are saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And so maybe, for those, this is a video podcast as well as audio, but maybe for the folks that are on audio, maybe you can share what some of the key takeaways were from that survey.
Sure. Absolutely. So the survey is titled The Private Cloud Outlook 2025, The Cloud Reset. And the reset is really recognizing this shift that we're seeing amongst customers. Historically, if I said the word cloud to you, you would naturally think public cloud, AWS, Azure. But the reality is that is changing. And now private cloud is without question a strategic equivalent to public cloud. That data indicated that, and that now customers actually see private cloud as a preferred cloud native environment. So historically, people would think, oh, perhaps those traditional workloads is where you do it. We found that the number one 3-year cloud priority amongst these 1,800 respondents was their investment of workloads in private cloud in particular. So 53% indicated that was their top priority. And so that was really telling to us. We are seeing that, the future is going to be a mix of public and private. So 2/3 prefer an environment that incorporates both. That's not a surprise. I mean, especially with some of the needs that are changing in a customer's environment, having that flexibility is important. But what we did see, and we weren't surprised based on our own conversation, was that 69% are repatriating workloads from public cloud to private cloud, and that includes cloud native applications as well. So that was that first set of findings. What we did also learn is there's some important things propelling, or the tailwinds driving this desire for moving to private cloud. It starts with security, generative AI, and cost predictability. So, security's always been top of mind. CIO, C-suite matter. And, it is the number one challenge for when you consider public cloud challenges. It is the number one. When it comes to driving generative AI projects, it's the number one. So in contrast to that, when it comes to private cloud, the overwhelming majority, 92% of organizations trust their private cloud. Again, it's dedicated infrastructure to them. So no wonder that they feel it provides the security and the compliance they require. The other thing that is important here is that there's just a very large majority that report waste with public cloud. 94% are seeing some sort of waste, and frightening numbers, almost half are seeing that 25% or more is being wasted of their budget going to public cloud. So clearly nobody wants to lose that much of their investment in the wrong areas. This can be for a variety of reasons, whether they are committed to contracts, but they haven't been able to migrate their applications. So clearly, that is an important problem. So the last thing around the study that I really want to highlight is that customers are working through and trying to address a big challenge with private cloud as well, and that is the IT silos. And I think this is an important conversation for us too, because it is the number one barrier for getting to a private cloud. And what we are seeing though is that IT leaders are seeing this problem, and they are making the shift to platform teams. So 81% reported that they are moving that direction. And I think that's really important for your listeners to understand that it's a big transformational change, but it is an important one for customers to really think about as they move forward to achieve their cloud goals and better support their business teams.
Yeah, I was going to say, and certainly that slide draws a lot of those factors, but and maybe Mitesh, you can chime in here on this as well. But like, what I would imagine AI would certainly be another one. Cost a huge one, because you always hear that Hotel California reference, in terms of like moving to public cloud, but also just with AI being so popular and everyone trying to take advantage of it for their businesses, like it's just. Public cloud doesn't just seem like the best place to park that information. Yeah. Mitesh, what do you see out there?
Absolutely, and in my role as the CTO for our field, I speak to most of our big customers and strategic customers, including folks in defense and healthcare, right? And I'm starting to see that trend, pick up more momentum. Specifically, beginning with what you mentioned, right? So AI certainly is part of that conversation because of data, right? Data is the new gold, right? It highlights the value that it possesses in the modern world, because similar to gold, right, it's valuable resources for these enterprises that can be mined, basically refined and used to create new applications, services, as well as insights for those enterprise grade customers, right? And they're reticent to bring that type of data into a public cloud environment, because then who owns the data and whose models are you training is the next question that shows up. So going back to what Raakhee was mentioning, right, there's definitely a tailwind here in conjunction with what's happening with AI, especially if you put those two items together, right, which is data sovereignty as well as Gen AI, right? So that way you can keep the data on-prem or within your private cloud, and then be able to train your models, do inference, build applications, and serve your customers with AI applications specifically using that private cloud environment. Now, the benefit that the C-level as well as the execution SME levels are seeing is at the top line, right? Specifically, once you've had the private cloud environment offering these services, for example, inside of Broadcom, we offer nearly 200 services that you can consume as a developer within 2 minutes or less within our environment, right? When you offer those services, it increases the developer velocity, increases the time to market for a lot of these applications, VM-based applications, container-based applications, AI-based applications. We host them all on top of VMware, right? So it's completely possible to build that environment and offer that up. So that actually has a accretive impact on your top line. And then going back to what Raakhee was saying, cost predictability actually gives you the ability to manage your cost much better than you do in public cloud. So in that private cloud environment, you could have automated resourcing as well as constraint-based deployment and capacity planning that helps you maintain that cost. So that way it impacts your bottom line as well. So we're starting to see significant impact for private cloud across of our significant customers and folks who are not customers yet, but will soon be, both at the top line as well as the bottom line, specifically with private cloud driving those tailwinds.
Yeah. And Raakhee, do you see this as something, I mean, I haven't read the entire study yet, but maybe you can share. Is this something where private cloud 100%, everyone's completely off public cloud, or is there a little bit of both, or what's the verdict?
No, the future is definitely a mix, right? Customers do want that flexibility, and well into the 90% and above are looking at moving to like a mix of private and public. So it's 92% today. It's moving to 93% in the 3-year projection. Pretty stable and steady there for them. But what we are seeing alongside of that is this new interest and investment, and that's what I was mentioning, that top priority with prioritizing new workloads to private cloud. So that's really exciting. They are also doing some of their additional workloads on public cloud, but at the same time, they need to manage their costs, manage their security. And I think that's very much tied to some of the challenges that they are trying to manage in that public cloud environment. So, they're all looking to have an optimized cloud operating model. And now the workloads will determine where best to put the applications.
So public cloud right now, there's a lot of, historically, you go back 7, 8 years ago, people went there because it had a developer experience and it had these like long list of interestingly named services that I could never keep straight, but there were, hundreds of them. It looks like private cloud is really caught up. How are we packaging? How are we offering the services? Where do they come from? How do we get those blueprints? How do we get those templates? Like how do we get there?
Great question, John, right? And I think you've hit on a critical point. Developer adoption is what you're really asking about. And developer adoption is critical for the success of a private cloud, right? Because developers are the key users who build, deploy, and maintain applications within those environments. These are revenue generating applications, right? For a company such as us, who is the 7th largest company from profit generation perspective globally, right? It is critical for us to keep our developers happy, engaged, and be fully utilizing their private cloud. So we have a couple of strategies for doing that, right? First and foremost, consumption is what we walk through, right? We walk in the developer's shoes, and we offer both a service catalog as well as the UI and private cloud. What it does is it provides the developer with friendly platforms, tools, APIs, things that they're familiar with, right? Kubernetes, VMs, databases, CI/CD pipelines like Jenkins or GitLab that can integrate into their application building process, right? So that way they can easily go to the service catalog UI or the UI API and say, hey, I want to go ahead and deploy a database, for example, as a service to be able to support my application. This basically enables us to deploy a service portal as well as a UI and API surface area where developers can spin up those workloads without having too much IT interference in the middle. So that actually accelerates the developer's velocity. Second part of that strategy is basically onboarding and documentation. We make it really easy, right, for the developer to come on to our platform and to understand how to use it. We integrate fully with Active Directory as well as Okta, and this is the trend we've seen at other customers as well, which is seamless integration. So that way, when you come into your corporate portal, what we used to call the intranet back in the 2000s, you basically can click a tile and that takes you to your private cloud. And then you see all of those 200 plus services. What it does is it creates a clear, accessible environment backed by tutorials. Any kind of help that you need in terms of, hey, I want to provision a database, but now I want to snapshot that VM, or I've deployed a container and I'm starting to see some chatter on the pod actually bringing down some of the deployments. I want to redeploy it, right? Or I'm seeing something in DFW. I want to go ahead and start blocking a particular firewall port or protocol. So what that enables the developer to do is get things done quickly, right? Both in terms of getting started as well as day-to-day environment. It lowers the learning curve, accelerating the adoption, because these self-service capabilities are available to that developer. Now, we're not just opening the door wide open and saying you can use any of these 200 services globally anywhere you want. We're saying you can use those as long as your BU has the capability and capacity to be able to service those. So that way we can make sure that the deployed workloads that are being ready as well as regulatory compliant. And then finally, it's to offer trainings and hackathons with showcases and performance of cost benefits. So the reason why that's important is developers trust developers. And when they see other developers utilizing these platforms, right, especially our private cloud, not just at Broadcom, but also at other customers, they start to gravitate towards that particular consumption model. And then we back this up with our CIO, CEO, CTO model, where we're evangelizing the usage of the private cloud. And finally, basically the developers see the success of it and they see that, hey, I can spin up a workload in two minutes or less and get going on my PRs as well as SRs and any of the feature requests that I need to build. It shows that private cloud basically becomes an ally to you being a successful developer. And that's how we've started addressing adoption within Broadcom and other customers for private cloud.
Yeah, I was going to add, I think Mitesh was very focused around how through the private cloud we can deliver that experience to the developers. But what's also powerful about the VCF platform is that the IT team is in control and they can make sure that the right policies are in place. for how these developers are using these different types of infrastructure in a way that aligns to the corporate policies, but that's transparent to those developers. So we make it as frictionless as possible, but ensure that IT can align to any sort of regulations or compliance that is required, which is, I would say, an extra powerful element of that private cloud strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know for folks listening to this, you may have already heard it, but if not, I mean, certainly John and I, we just did the VMware Cloud Foundation series, but then we've been diving deep on all the various aspects. Link below for that content. But another thing I noticed, Raakhee, was that in that survey, it talked something about, it's one thing to change, the way you're doing your business, but it's more than just the technology. It's about people, it's about the process and all that. Can you tell me what we're talking about when we talk about, making a complete platform change?
Yeah. So there's a couple things to consider, right? The number one issue we raised was the silos, right? And there is a need to close the skills gap. And that was another issue that was raised within the study. People are having challenges making sure that their individuals on their team have the skill set for this, broader platform strategy. What's powerful about the approach that's happening, first of all, the good news is leaders understand that needs to change, and they're moving towards a platform strategy. So 81% are moving their teams to a platform approach. And then as we, in the VCF division, we just introduced VCF 9.0. It's a full unified experience. So all of those individuals who are versed in vSphere and have all those skill sets, as they move to this new unified experience, extending out your skill set, not only in the areas of compute, but storage, network, operations, automation, all of this is going to be a lot easier for them. And that's an important piece of this as well. But, I know Mitesh has worked with a lot of different customers. So the technology is just one part of this. There's the people and process and what needs to happen at the organizational level. So Mitesh, why don't you jump in and talk about some of the experiences you've had working with the customers?
Absolutely. And thank you, Raakhee. That is a critical point within our customer base as well, right? That the CIOs and the C-levels, as well as directors, are thinking about, right? Which is, how do you do that skill gap mitigation, essentially? The developers definitely have, a gravitation towards private cloud, but that also basically has a second order impact. For example, if a developer goes ahead and spins up a containerized workload on top of VMware, that also creates a need for an ecosystem of operators who can actually manage that environment, right? So that way, it basically has a light cone effect in terms of having the skills to be able to manage the private cloud that offers number of different workloads, for example, containers, VMs, databases, you name it. The way that we've seen customers tackle that, right, specifically the skill gap mitigation, is first beginning at the C level, right? CIOs that are funding joint training initiatives for their operating experts, right, the SMEs. So that way we've done things like the private cloud bootcamp, where we're covering everything for private cloud for our customer base, from, let's say, selecting the chips that you should be using in your private cloud, all the way to how do you do org transformation, so that way you can have overlapping skills and be able to expand the career opportunity for your operations engineers within your private cloud, right? Specifically because as more and more folks come onto that private cloud, it increases the demand for those engineers and operators that specialize in that infrastructure, right? So for example, the cloud infrastructure engineer or the CI/CD DevOps engineer, right? There are a lot of those folks that are needed to be able to maintain, care, and feed for those. Beyond that, we've also seen cross-functional synergies that are addressing that skills gap. So for example, at some of our customers, folks who are like trained in just networking for years, they come to us and say, Mitesh, why would I care about databases? Well, now it's becoming more and more intertwined. So that way the private cloud enables you to have that cross-functional skill. So that way, if you're a network expert, developing a database expertise or containerization expertise gives you that ability to actually scale further to be able to serve both the developers, the architects, right, as well as the end customers themselves. Now, this does mean that there has to be an investment, and it has to be a key strategic goal for the enterprises. And we've certainly seen that our customers, in partnership with the engineering and the employees and operators themselves as well.
Yeah, John, what was your first job in IT? Is it the same thing you're doing now, or was it something different?
It's changed a bit, but I mean, some things have changed. Other things, it's I'm still having to fix printers on occasion. Not that I believe the fix should really be anything other than throwing them in the pool. So but no, thinking to this job skills challenge, you're talking about the internal training and the internal improvements, but for just speed of getting there quickly. Are we seeing people go outside their organization? Are they going to cloud providers, to partners? Like, what are the opportunities there?
Yeah, we're starting to see folks also take on that training and upskilling, so that way they'll go ahead and build their specialized talent, sometimes outside of formal structures. A lot of times it's folks that are going to Udemy, for example, or I've even seen folks pull up YouTube. So I think there's a plethora of places that folks can go to upskill themselves. But the other item that we can help with is partner with us as a vendor, and we have an amazing professional services team that can help you understand where do you need to accelerate and upskill internal teams, and how do you actually do some of that org transformation, so that way you can gain the maximum benefit out of what folks are learning.
Yeah.
It is also up to the folks to learn themselves. So for example, on a regular basis in our team, in the professional services side, in the field, we make sure that folks are certified and they're updating the certification in newer and newer technologies, not just VMware, but also things like the data center build out, or AI build out, for example. So it's up to the folks, but we've certainly starting to see that's how we're starting to get an upskill across the environment.
Yeah. And John, there actually, in the data that we captured from the report, we found that 80% of these organizations leaned on partners to achieve their cloud transformation. It's a big endeavor. It takes a lot, because it's not just the technology; it is the people, process, the ecosystem. All of that needs to come together. And working with someone that's gone down that trail and blazed that trail before you is beneficial. Seeing how it works in other organizations is incredibly beneficial. So, lean on those partners. But I think what Mitesh has also highlighted is now there's an opportunity, especially as we deliver this new unified platform, that individuals can really upskill. There's all this free digital training. Our own customers have free instructor-led training as well. We have communities for learning all this great technology. So take advantage of that. It really can make individuals really improve their own career trajectory and expand into new and exciting areas.
Yeah.
And Raakhee, I would love to second that, right? Especially Raakhee, what you said is really important. The hands-on labs and the free training that's available by VMware, my gosh, that is a gold mine. So if folks are not using it, please sign on to hands-on labs and start using it. We run it on our own platform, so I know who's actually using it and not. But it's amazing. It's a free benefit. It's a benefit that the community should use and accelerate the way Raakhee's mentioned.
Yeah, that is a great benefit.
Hands-on labs is actually updated for 9. I know historically, we would do launches and hands-on labs, and all this stuff would take a while to get up to date. But it's there, people. Go log in.
Yeah. We're seeing the numbers of those use on those new hands-on labs going off the charts. So jump in there and take advantage for sure.
I love that. So last question, and this is for whoever wants to answer, but I'm just curious, what advice do you have for anybody that's, that sees the writing on the wall, sees that this is the way, but how do you get that influence, and how do you get change inside of an organization that, it's a big ask for a lot of companies. And so what would you recommend for folks that are listening that might be in a situation where they would love to make this type of change, but it doesn't seem feasible?
Yeah, I do want to add one thing here, and then I think Mitesh, I definitely will want you to chime in with all the different customers you've seen and get down this path. I have seen individuals from customer conversations where they saw the opportunity of leading their teams with a private cloud strategy. And while it took a fair amount of work working across different teams, it really did elevate their role in an organization and put them into new leadership roles. So I do see this as an opportunity to help improve your own career path going forward. But it does take a lot of championing and partnering across different teams. Mitesh, do you want to chime in on some of the best practices here?
Absolutely, Raakhee. And you've called it out right, that the individual SMEs that are also championing that private cloud have a lot of tools to be able to demonstrate that and succeed in their own careers, right? I've certainly seen at other customers as well that folks who've adopted the private cloud, championed it, helped it be adopted, are starting to save their customers, their enterprises, more than $100 million a year plus, accrutively, right? So it's 100 million and growing, not just on the cost of replacing the public cloud. We're talking about streamlining the internal operations and supporting revenue generating applications. So that's certainly a great way for the individual contributors to start pushing the envelope from the ground level up in terms of, hey, let's do private cloud adoption, as well as here's what's in it for me, basically, right? And if you face difficulty, unfortunately, that is the way, right? Difficulty is part of that path, but navigating some of that difficulty with the ecosystem and with your team is part of the journey. The other way we've also seen it is that at the customer sides, we also come from from the top down, right? Specifically, C-level support for private cloud is critical, right? Especially because it does a number of things. For example, I've seen at other customers, if you have CIO, CTO level support, right, it basically helps you to do strategic alignment and it unlocks the budget. So that way it ensures that the project that you want to do with private cloud is aligned with the organizational goal and priorities. It also helps you allocate resources. So that way, once you've secured that budget, you can actually go ahead and allocate personnel and technology resources. For example, customers that are building out net new data centers to service increased demand. How do you get those resources? You've got to secure both the grassroots level as well as the top-down level. It also increases the organizational influence once you have a CTO or CIO, because now you've got somebody at the top level, driving change, evangelizing that. But it also gives you that ability to do fast decision making, especially if you're going from ground level up. You'll notice that in certain cases, and other customers I've seen, right, there are camps of people who are like, well, I only like this particular way of doing, cloud automation. Or another person be like, well, I want to do it the way we did it in 2015. Well, you need somebody to come in and broker that decision, right? And having a C-level support actually helps that decision be made faster. So that way it accelerates the approval and makes the project essentially more efficient, right? And then it also makes that project prioritized higher. So that way you can risk mitigate some of the items. And now that you have a C-level person from the top down, you've got a stakeholder buy-in. So that way it enhances your credibility as you're starting to push the private cloud further up. It encourages support from other key holders, and it aligns a lot of that team. And it ensures the long-term success, right? Because going back to what you were saying, what's the writing on the wall? Well, if you want to be here for a long term and align to the long-term success of the enterprise, right? This private cloud build out, both the bottom-up grassroots level as well as the top-down with the C-level, gives you that sustainable momentum through the implementation, scaling, and operating of this private cloud for years to come, right? Because without that C-level backing, what I've seen at other customers is projects will often face delays or underfunding or misalignment, which reduces the success rate, basically, of the private cloud. So this approach, right, the strategy approach of sandwich, bottom up, where we're evangelizing from the SME onwards, and top down, where we're evangelizing from the C-level downwards, and ensuring the budget alignment and the strategic goals are fully aligned with the private cloud. That has been the key to success for both individual contributors as well as enterprises as a whole that are adopting private cloud.
Well said. Well said. Yeah. Well, I'm going to be leaving links in the show notes of this podcast to not only the private cloud outlook survey, as well as links to Mitesh's session where he actually talked about how Broadcom is actually doing this, and several little links pertaining to this discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been awesome. John, any closing words? Can you leave us with a quote from Jurassic Park to put a bow on this episode?
Oh, I'm just struck in awe in the same way people are looking at dinosaurs, at, seeing the full circle of life come about, going all the way from the private cloud, running my in-house data center, to the public cloud, to multi-cloud, to back to private cloud. It's the circle of life, Pete.
I love putting you on the spot. Very good, John. Raakhee, Mitesh, thank you so much for joining us on Virtually Speaking, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.